Alexander Rivera sat behind the wheel of a borrowed yellow cab at the corner of 5th and Main, hands steady on the steering wheel, heart anything but. He was 38 years old, heir to a tech empire worth more than most people could imagine, and he was about to do something that felt equal parts ridiculous and necessary. He'd rented the car through a friend who owed him a favor, thrown on an old baseball cap and a jacket that smelled faintly of cigarettes, and told himself this was just about clarity, just about knowing for sure. He'd been engaged to Isabella Cruz for 6 months. She was stunning, sharp-tongued, always dressed like she belonged in a magazine. Everyone said they made sense together. She moved through his world with ease, smiled at all the right people, knew which charities to support and which parties mattered. But lately, something had been off. She'd grown distant when they were alone, distracted. She laughed at his jokes in public, but barely looked at him in private. He told himself he was overthinking it. He told himself love took work. But doubt had a way of growing in the quiet. So he'd come up with his plan. Isabella and her friends were meeting downtown for brunch, and he'd arranged to be the one who picked them up afterward. She wouldn't recognize him. He'd make sure of that. He just wanted to hear her talk when she thought he wasn't listening. Maybe he'd hear her defend him. Maybe he'd hear her talk about their future with warmth in her voice. Maybe he'd feel foolish for ever doubting her. His phone buzzed. The pickup request came through. His chest tightened. 10 minutes later, Isabella slid into the back seat with 2 of her friends, Carla and Vanessa. He kept his head down, adjusted the rearview mirror just enough to see without being seen. Isabella wore sunglasses, even though the sky was overcast. She smelled like expensive perfume. She didn't say hello. "God, I needed that mimosa," Carla said, settling in beside her. 2 more months, and you're locked in, Bella. How does it feel? Isabella laughed, light and careless. Like I'm about to win a lottery. Alexander's hands tightened on the wheel. He told himself it was a joke. People made jokes. Seriously, though, Vanessa chimed in from the other side. "You're marrying one of the richest guys in the state. You're set for life." "I know," Isabella said, and there was something cold in her voice now, something Alexander had never heard before. "Trust me, I know exactly what I'm doing." "Do you even love him?" Carla asked, half laughing. There was a pause. Alexander held his breath. "Love," Isabella said finally. "I love what it can give me. I love the houses, the trips, the status. Alexander himself." She sighed. "He's boring, honestly. Sweet, but boring. He talks about his little coding projects like they matter. He wants to have kids and live some quiet life. It's like he doesn't even understand what he has." The words hit him like glass breaking inside his chest. "So what's the plan?" Vanessa asked, her tone conspiratorial now. "Same as always," Isabella said smoothly. "I marry him. I play the loving wife for a few years. Then I file for divorce and take half of everything. My lawyer already looked into it. I'll walk away with more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. Carla laughed, loud and sharp. "You're insane. I love it. And in the meantime," Isabella continued, her voice dropping to something almost playful, "I'm not exactly planning to be faithful. There's this guy I've been seeing, Marco. He's fun, exciting, everything Alexander isn't. I'll keep that going on the side." Alexander's too trusting to notice. Alexander's vision blurred. His throat felt tight. He wanted to pull over, to turn around and confront her, to scream, but he didn't. He kept driving. He let them talk. He listened to every word. They talked about the wedding like it was a business deal. They laughed about how easy it had been to fool him. They made plans for after the divorce, trips they'd take, things they'd buy. Isabella never once spoke his name with affection. She spoke it like it belonged to a stranger, like he was nothing more than a means to an end. When he finally pulled up to Isabella's building, she tossed a $20 bill onto the front seat without looking at him. "Keep the change," she said flatly, and the 3 of them climbed out, still laughing. Alexander sat there for a long time after they were gone. The city moved around him, people passing by, horns honking, life continuing like nothing had happened. But something inside him had cracked open. The man he'd been an hour ago felt impossibly far away. He drove back to his apartment in silence. He didn't cry. He didn't rage. He just felt hollow. But by the next morning, the hollowness had hardened into something sharper. Clarity. Resolve. He hired a private investigator. Within 2 weeks, he had everything he needed. Photos of Isabella with Marco, text messages, financial records showing she'd been funneling money into a separate account, email threads with her lawyer discussing divorce strategy. It was all there, cold and calculated and undeniable. He didn't yell when he ended it. He didn't give her the satisfaction of a scene. He called her to his office, laid the evidence on the desk in front of her, and told her the engagement was over. She tried to deny it at first, then to cry, then to bargain. But Alexander just stood there, calm and unmoved, and told her to leave. She did, and he never saw her again. The weeks that followed were strange. He felt lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because the lie was gone, because he didn't have to pretend anymore. Heavier because he'd come so close to giving his life to someone who saw him as nothing more than a bank account. He took time off work. He called old friends he hadn't spoken to in years, guys he'd known before the money got complicated, before every relationship felt like a transaction. They met for beers, for basketball, for long conversations that had nothing to do with business or status. He remembered what it felt like to laugh without wondering what someone wanted from him. He started running again in the mornings. He read books he'd been meaning to read for years. He donated to causes that mattered to him, not because it looked good, but because it felt right. Slowly, carefully, he rebuilt himself. 6 months later, he met Sophia. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't fate. It was a random Tuesday at a coffee shop near his neighborhood. She was sitting by the window, grading papers, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her sweater worn soft at the edges. He'd gone in for a coffee and ended up sitting near her by accident. When she dropped her pen, he picked it up. She smiled and said thank you. They started talking. She was a third-grade teacher. She lived in a small apartment with a roommate and a rescue dog named Benny. She didn't know who Alexander was. She didn't care about his money because she didn't know it existed. She cared that he listened when she talked about her students. She cared that he laughed at her jokes. She cared that he showed up when he said he would. They started seeing each other. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into weekend walks and late-night phone calls. She met him as Alexander, not as Alexander Rivera, the tech heir. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt seen. One evening, months into their relationship, they were sitting on her couch, Benny curled up between them, and Sophia looked over at him with this soft, thoughtful expression. "You know what I like about you," she said. "What?" "You're kind," she said simply. "You listen. You care about things that matter. You make me feel safe." He didn't know what to say. His throat felt tight again, but not like before, not like that day in the cab. This was different. "You make me feel that way, too," he said quietly. She smiled and leaned her head on his shoulder. And in that moment, Alexander understood something he hadn't before. Love wasn't about what you could give someone. It wasn't about status or appearances or security. It was about being enough, exactly as you were, for someone who saw you clearly and chose you anyway. He thought about Isabella sometimes. Not with anger, but with something closer to gratitude. She'd broken his heart. Yes, but she'd also save him. If he hadn't overheard that conversation, if he hadn't seen the truth, he would have married her. He would have spent years trying to be enough for someone who never valued him at all. He would have missed this, missed Sophia, missed the life he was building now, quiet and real in his. The betrayal had been brutal, but it had also been a gift. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is also the thing that sets you free. Sometimes you have to see yourself through someone else's eyes, invisible and unguarded, to understand who really matters. Alexander had played the part of the cab driver for one afternoon, but what he'd learned in those 20 minutes had changed everything. He'd learned that true love couldn't be bought, that wealth without connection was just noise, that the right person wouldn't care about his last name or his bank account. They'd care about the way he made them feel, the way they made each other feel. And now, Sitting beside Sophia in her small, warm apartment, her hand in his, Benny snoring softly between them, Alexander felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt home.